Witty, thought-provoking, and uplifting, Southern Soul Livestream is a program that you'll invite your friends over to watch every week, where you'll learn about interesting guests and get to share in their fascinating experiences. Tune in each Thursday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern to connect with guests from across the generations and to laugh with our eclectic hosts who are as charming as they are talented. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's our host, Calvin.
I am excited about the show tonight, and I tell you why. I've known Bilen for many years, and one thing that's cool is when you reconnect with someone over the years, and I think she must have did a press release before I kind of knew that she was kind of doing cool stuff. And she does this press release, and I'm like, wow, I didn't know she was doing that, right? But when I began to look at the topic, marketing, strategy, communication, building your story, your brand, and your message for your nonprofit or purpose driven organization, I was like, OMG, we got to get her on the show. We got to get her because I can only imagine, Billin, how much that is like a big topic, and that sometimes people don't know what they need and need what they know. But I'm just happy that you're here tonight. And, if you don't mind telling people a few things about you and why you're happy to be here, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, Calvin, so much for having me. It has been years since I won't date us and say how many years it has been since undergrad. But excited to be here and see a familiar face and have this conversation with you, which is really just about my life's work. This is what I've spent more than a decade, if not more than that, on, and so I'm excited to talk about that. Again, my name is Bilen Mesfin Packwood. I live right now in Oakland, California, which is where I've been for more than a decade, actually. But originally, I'm from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and I spent a lot of time in the South too, both at in Nashville, Tennessee, where we were for undergrad, and also Georgia, which is where a lot of my family still is, actually. And I am a mama to a really active 4-year-old who probably will bang on the door in a little bit too, and a wife to an amazing change maker too. So, just a little bit about myself.
Awesome, awesome. So let people know what to expect. I'm going to let people know what to expect because we're going to start talking a little bit about you, and then we're going to talk about the company that you founded, and then what we're
Sure.
going to talk about is the community. But before we get into that, let's talk more about you. I mean, one thing, and I know the answer to this question, right? But do you feel that you're following a career path that is aligned with your core values?
Mm, absolutely. I think I've been somehow super blessed to find myself on a career path where I get to work with folks to make change every day, literally every day. So there's no I don't think there's ever a day where I feel like I'm not contributing in some way to a broader cause or a cause bigger than myself. So that feels incredibly meaningful, and it feels like a blessing in a lot of ways. And I think the other way that I feel like I get to live out my values is honestly in the way that I create the business or I run the business. I get to like showcase what I believe a business should be as well. So that's super, super meaningful too.
Yes, I mean, I think it's such a beautiful thing. I mean, how many people just dream about the concept of having this purpose-driven life, right? Or, creating an organization. I mean, it just gives me goosebumps thinking about it, right? But for you, when did you realize like you wanted to do something purpose-driven? Was it always the case? I mean, because you started out in journalism, right? If you don't mind giving people your
Yeah,
background, right?
sure. Yeah. So I've always been a writer and I've always loved storytelling. So, in that sense, I've always just wanted to write. And to be really honest, when I think I was an undergrad, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Ultimately, it was a time spent in confusion versus like direction, I would say, which I think, that's what school is for. Hopefully you get to like experiment and see things. And so I knew I wanted to write. I didn't really know if I wanted to be a journalist, quote unquote. I knew I wanted to write and create kind of stories and media opportunities. And so that's what I pursued after undergrad. I basically set myself up to go into journalism, spent time at a magazine in Georgia, and worked in like marketing for Nashville Public Television, and then came out to California to go to grad school with the idea that I was just gonna, continue to be a storyteller, continue to be a journalist. And then after I graduated, I did do journalism for about a year before I moved into strategic communications. I worked for the San Francisco district attorney at the time for about 3 to 4 years, and then decided to start out as a solo consultant. To be honest, I never thought about having a quote unquote business or a company. That wasn't really a goal. I just wanted to branch out on my own and be my own boss. And so I was a solo consultant for a while, actually, until 2015, which is when I started to build out a team.
Yes, the life of the solo consultant. I call that when you are working as a entrepreneur consultant and you not getting direct deposit, or if you do get it, it shows up once or twice a year. I mean, how did that feel for you? Were you nervous? Were you excited? Had you had previous
Man,
examples, right? Did you grow up in that household?
no. So I grew up in an immigrant household
Okay.
where when I told my mom I was gonna go out on my own, the first question she asked me about was about healthcare, like healthcare benefits. Are you gonna have healthcare? Because we grew up with the understanding that like stability was more important than entrepreneurship. Even though I think my mom is a really smart, strong woman. I felt like if she actually came to the States at an earlier time in her life, she could be running companies too. But for them, it really was about just establishing a life, making sure that their children got an education and got jobs and got stability, got healthcare. And so when I kind of threw that all up in the air and was like, I'm gonna go work for myself, there were some feelings there. There were some feelings there, and so and in the beginning, I think I was about 28, 29. I didn't have a mortgage, I didn't have a family, I was just supporting myself, and so there was a lot of room to take risks and innovate, and kind of see and experiment, which was really fun. But it was not easy, especially the first couple of years. I don't I would not describe those years as easy, but they
Yeah.
were they were definitely fun.
Yeah, I got a buddy who he's just doing it now after, and he worked a job I think in nuclear or something, and that stable life, and he's just getting ready to do it. I'm like, dude, if you're scared, if you're nervous, if you have no idea what you're gonna do, and I'm like, you're doing the right thing, and kudos to him
100%.
because it is like a really big deal, right, to do it. So
Mhm.
kudos to you. Tell me this: what
Thank you.
about family, right? Like, I
Mhm.
mean, how does family play a part of this? I mean, do you kind of, go to an office separate from family? Do you do the work-life integration thing? Is your husband supportive?
Yeah.
I mean, what's that dynamic?
Oh, that's a really good question, and I feel like a complex answer. So actually, right now, my husband too has his own nonprofit that he's been running for about 8 years. We just got joint office space. So after 2 years of working out of the home during COVID, we were like, hey, might as well keep this going. So we ended up getting actually a big space in Jacqueline Square in Oakland, and his organization is going to be there, and my company is going to be there, and we're also thinking about starting a new venture together. So it kind of just I'm a big believer in letting life unfold, and kind of and having a general direction, but like leaving room for life to unfold, and it's unfolding in that way. I don't think I would have expected that, even just like 3 years ago that we would be doing that, but here we are. So we have, in terms of the way we manage family, I think we very much count on partnership. And so, like, even, I do preschool drop offs, he does pickups, if we have to, if school is closed, then I take on the morning shift, he takes on the afternoon shift. Just ways to kind of balance, you know, raising Eliana, who's our daughter, and manage the things we have to manage as well. So it's definitely like a partnership in that sense.
You know, I love that story because, it leads me into the next question that it just kind of talks about, like, what inspired you to change, I mean, to start Change,
Hmm.
Consulting LLC? I mean, you're stepping out, you're becoming an entrepreneur for the first time. Now, I think you've grown to like a 12-person, consultant,
Hmm.
group,
Hmm.
and you're hiring, right? I mean, come on, do you like pinch yourself, or like, how does that even happen, right? I mean, so, like, what
So I
inspired
would
you?
say, yeah, maybe I can just also share a little bit about who we are and what we do. So we are a full service communication shop. We work primarily with nonprofits and foundations that are working on social and racial justice in particular. And we focus a lot on groups that are working on systems change in terms of either creating new opportunities for Black communities and communities of color to thrive or removing any barriers to opportunities for our communities. So that tends to be our sweet spot, and that's what we've been doing for a long time, And so, right now we're about we just finished hiring a hiring process and brought on 5 people, so we're a team of 12. So we're gonna see where that takes us for this year. We're just gonna get used to that, get used to each other as a team, get used to kind of this new level where we're at. And my theory around it is to take it one step at a time, instead of trying to you know build everything all at once. And there's a theory I follow called step change growth. So it's you grow and then you kind of level out and see where that takes you. Then you grow again. So about every other year, thinking about another level of growth and having time to adjust in the meantime is also, I think, a theory that I follow.
Yeah, it makes me think, as you're growing, it gives you an opportunity to kind of define the culture, right? That's important to you. So do you have like any values or principles, as you do this step change growth? I mean, is it
Yeah.
like flexible work from home? Is it like,
Oh,
bring your baby to work? I mean, you guys doing any weird stuff like
yeah.
that? Or let me say not weird, exciting things
I
like
don't know if
that?
hopefully that's not that's not weird, but for sure, there's a few things that I really believe in. One is like, I don't know if I can curse on your show, no assholes, like,
Okay, okay.
no toxic culture, no individual ascendancy at the cost of relationships, no trying to like have big, high egos, a lot of drama. I really believe in low ego, high impact. If we're going to be
Wow.
arguing over things, I really want us to be arguing over the work, So that's something I communicate to everyone and I feel very strongly about. I do not want to create a toxic work culture. I feel like if I ever do that, then we should just close up shop and do something else, because that no one wants to do that. So that's one big thing. Another big thing is I do believe in equity and try to make sure folks are getting paid well, that they're taken care of. We do things like, especially during COVID, we did things like work from home stipends and quarterly self care stipends. We believe in this is, I think, a new thing that we're doing a lot, which is just having even quarterly shutdowns. So we shut down the entire shop for about four
Wow.
to five days every quarter, so we get to
I
rest.
knew it was some in there
And we do
somewhere.
like a we
It,
do like a big shutdown at the end of the year, just because it's so I feel like things move fast these days. There's so much work and there's so much to do. And so figuring out ways to like rest and reflect in between is good. We actually just moved to, even though we got this office space, we're all going to be working virtually essentially for the rest of the year as well. Um, I think people really love working from
yeah,
working from
yeah.
home. So I don't feel like I need to have control over like you need to come into the office space to deliver. A lot of it is because the team is really amazing. Like it's a it's a team of grown-ups. They know what they want to do. I feel like sometimes they manage me versus I managing them, because they all really care about their work, which is a pleasure, to be honest. So
You know, it's cool because I think you told a story where you just hired a couple VPs, right? So you
mhm.
hire these VPs and they're doing their VP stuff. Did that free you up to do different stuff? Or you like wearing a big CEO hat now? What's going on? Because I can only
Well, yeah,
imagine.
good question. Yeah,
You
so
said they
I
manage you. Tell me about it. I'm curious because sometimes people are like, oh, she's awesome, she's super CEO, but something tells me you're like, hey, I think I'm just figuring this out. I don't know. I don't want to talk for you, but I'm
yeah,
curious.
you know exactly that's how it is. I keep it hella real and transparent.
Uh huh.
I'm like, listen, I've never ran a 12-person shop before. Let's figure this out together. And I think that helps to maybe, I don't know. I think we all kind of see leadership sometimes as like, superhuman folks that are doing superhuman things, and their leaders are over here and we're over here. And I don't really see that. I think I'm human. I'm
Hmm.
figuring some things out. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm learning and growing through this process. And so I want to be just as transparent about that as anything else with the team. So one of the things, honestly, that I had to do was change my my title to CEO, because for a long time I never saw myself as that. I just kind of saw myself as a person who's doing the work, and I still am. And so I I I noticed though that I needed to shift my mindset. So that's what I'm working on, and the title change helped with that in terms of seeing myself as more of a CEO versus the person who's always doing the work. Like, I now have a different set of um, duties on my job description than I did even a year ago.
So
And that has to come with the growth. So I'm figuring that out. I really do believe in like progress over perfection. So, you know, I'm gonna keep it real about where we are. As long as we're better this year than we were last year, I'm comfortable with that and I'm
yeah.
happy with that.
I love your keep it real nature because, even I work for this company and one of the core mission principles and values is a no bullshit culture.
Mm,
It's literally stated, and you're often in sessions where either a baby's going to run through, a cat's going to show up. Typically, when a
I
cat
love
show up,
that.
that means the meeting's gone too long, and then there's always going to be somebody dropping these no bullshit whatever, and it's called. Oh, the other thing is don't f the customer. These are real mission statements, right?
Mm,
And
I love that.
it excites me because it gives me the opportunity and probably a little insight into your world. Is that when you get to build something from scratch
Mm.
with brown people as a woman led organization. I mean, I don't know if that's scary or exciting, right? Do you feel like you have like any like burden or like opportunity on your shoulder? I'm just curious, or maybe you
Mm.
didn't think about it till I said it. I'm
I
sorry.
mean, yeah, it's scary, because one of the things we face as actually as Black and Brown founders, or I don't even know if I consider myself a founder. It's more, I consider myself more as a small business owner.
Okay.
Is that there's, my husband and I talk about it all the time. There's very little safety net, and so it's scary to think about growth or innovation if you don't really have a safety net to fall back on. You then get into a place where if you get some, you kind of want to hold on to it because you don't know if it's going to come again, but you can't really grow in that way. And so having even so, how it's a really a question. If you don't have a safety net, how do you give yourself the confidence you need to grow? And it's a lot of work.
Mm.
It's probably more work than other folks would have to deal with, who do have safety nets, whether or not it's knowing that there's a pot of money somewhere if you're running low on cash, or you're taking a risk and it might not pay off. It's not gonna like totally just kill your dream. So if you don't really have that, what does it take to be able to take risks and to innovate? It's probably more. It's harder. It takes a lot more. Um, a lot of on my end, a lot of mindset work
Hmm.
to motivate myself to take risks, to anticipate positive things versus like thinking about all the negative things that can happen. So it's a real thing. I think it's a structural thing, that we all have to kind of navigate and deal with on a personal level all the time.
Thanks for sharing that because that's real. I hadn't thought about it that way. I hadn't thought about, with the responsibility, there's the burden, but then there's also this thing of, hey, there's risk. And there's risks associated with, hey, I don't have time to be Superman, Superwoman, whatever. I got bills to pay. I got to handle this thing. And let me just kind of play it more conservative here. But that's real. And I could tell that
Right.
that was very heartfelt. Well, that's why you're here, because that's one of the key things we do when we're looking for speakers for Southern Soul. The number one thing I do, I'm like, do they have a humble spirit? Or they community
Mm.
led as compared to the bullet point people? Them people who put the bullet point on their resume and say, I went and fed the children. No, not them. But thanks for sharing that because it really made me think, and it just kind of gave me insight into the real part of it. So
Mhm.
tell me this, and for the audience, just so you know how we do this. If it's your first time here, we're gonna cover this last section where we're gonna talk about community, but then it's your turn to give questions. So be thinking about your questions. You can drop them in the chat. Tamika's gonna grab them, or you can take yourself off mute when we go into dialogue and we can talk about it. And at the very end, we're gonna have open discussion. So a couple more questions, Bill, before we get into the community part. Tell us about some of the ways you guys help organizations. And I love the way
Mhm.
that this is described. Or help organizations raise awareness and visibility, change hearts and minds, and inspire actions. I just love that. How do you guys do that? What are some tools or techniques you guys display at Change
Yeah.
Consulting to help organizations do that?
Yeah. So I I started change consulting because I really, first of all, believe that change makers are superheroes, so, other folks get excited about maybe musicians or, you know, movie stars. I get excited about folks who really have ideas for how to make our world better. I think I'm super always inspired by the brilliance and just the guts and courage that the folks we work with always exhibit. So, so that's one. And then I also started it because I believe communications is key to seeing the change we want to see in the world, shifting hearts and minds, shifting narratives, um, removing these like deeply entrenched ideas folks have about Black communities and communities of color. Communications is core to that. So I wanted to start. I wanted to kind of shape a place where if you're a change maker and you needed communication support, you can come find it at Change Consulting. So our theory of change is really providing a continuum of communication services to nonprofits and foundations. And so, some of the ways that that plays out is, for example, there was a group that wanted to start $100 million fund for Black-led power building nonprofits in California. And so, working with them around the communications, both the messaging and the strategies and the materials to be able to do that. And that group has raised, I think, as of this point, about a little bit more than $60 million in less than a year. And so that's one way that we participate with them. Another is, let's say a group wants to see a piece of policy, whether it's on the ballot or through the legislature, come to life around a really critical issue, partnering with them around the communications, both the strategy and the hands on implementation to do that, whether it's media relations or digital or content, to be able to do that. And a third example I would give is if, let's say, there's an organization that maybe has been doing the work for a while and they need to rebrand, they need a fresh message, they need a fresh look or a new name or a new tagline. They need to kind of, um, maybe they haven't been doing communications before in a concerted way and they really want to level up in terms of how they show up in the world, then we can partner with them to do that as well.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I'd be honest if I didn't say, before I, started Southern Soul, I didn't really understand how important messaging was until I'm
Mm,
sitting there and I'm writing and I'm trying to articulate this thing that's simple, but it's complicated. And I'm looking
hmm
for all of the words. I'm looking for through the thesaurus, and I cannot find the words and the phrases, right? And it's so close to you. So it seems like some of the work you guys do may even help people describe their own self. Some of the reading I was doing
100%.
is the storytelling, right? Is that,
Yeah.
and I've always felt storytelling is a great tool, right? but just being able to kind of tell that story. And I remember at first I was trying to tell my story, and I said, that story sounds like 1990. It just didn't seem, you know what I mean? I just stopped it. I'm like, I can't share this story because it's a good story, but it needs to be, I don't know, remastered, right? I don't know. It was black and white, and I needed to add color to it. But I definitely gained an appreciation because even though I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing marketing stuff, I'm like, if you don't have the right message, the right communication, the right story, then how can you package that? So
Yeah.
yeah, so that was my aha moment, right? In appreciation for what you do. Anything you want to say?
That's
It seemed
real.
like you had a thought.
Yeah, I think a couple of things to say about that. Oftentimes what we find is there are people who are just heads down doing the work, for a long time, and they haven't stopped to think about what it all means and how to paint the picture of their impact or their work. And so that's definitely something we encounter a lot. Um, Especially if folks are doers, like they're committed to just doing the work. And so they're hella effective in that way. And then figuring out how to really express it for greater impact is one thing. And for us, we really approach communications from a place of starting from goals. So it's really thinking about what are the goals that, in terms of what do you really want to accomplish. How can communications help you do that? Thinking about who you want to reach, your audience, and then thinking about the messaging that's going to move that particular audience to action to get to the goals. And then only then do we really think about just the strategies and tactics come from that. But it's figuring out those four kind of cornerstones of communication strategy, and helping them with that.
Yeah, I think that's a cool place to start. I was looking at your job description that you have. So let me ask the question: are you still hiring, or
Sure.
has that job already been filled? Because it seems like you guys move
We
fast.
yeah, no, we just went through a four month hiring process and found some amazing folks. So folks are going to be the last two hires are going to be joining us in April. So I think we're going to stay at this place
Uh-huh.
for the rest of the year and then evaluate whether or not we do something else.
Okay, so 12 for on hold. I tell you what I saw because, at some point in my life, I became an expert at reading job descriptions. But I liked the way it was written because it described some of the key skills you were looking for, right? Not
Mm.
only just being good at writing, but be good at, communicating and telling
Hmm.
stories and interviewing and stuff like that. I said, you know what? That sounds like you guys are doing some real valuable type things, right? So it kind of got me excited. And like I said, if I hadn't went through the process of multiple times trying to build something from nothing, from scratch, I would not have appreciation. I'd be like, lawyers, what do they do? That's what I used to think, right? But then when you go through that experience, you're like, this thing is so important because you're right. If you're a doer, if you're really focused on the execution, it's like sometimes your mind is like siloed. It's so focused on that
Hmm.
thing that it really, is hard. Now, let's get to the
Yeah,
favorite
and
part.
also
Go
just
ahead.
to also give credit to the folks who actually led that. This was the first time I didn't have to do the hiring process from scratch. So really appreciative for the team who did the hiring process. And also, one thing that we think about both in messaging, hiring, whatever, is really leading with values first and communicating the values first. So hopefully, folks who align with your values also come join you. And it sounds like you and I are aligned on the values
Yes,
based on
yes,
what you're
the
talking
no BS culture, because and I think Tamika captured one of your favorite quotes, which is, let's get into the community, and this is a part I know that the audience likes. I was looking at some of your quotes, and I was like, you should probably start writing these down if you don't already. So some of your quotes is
about.
it like, let me read one of them. We often say communication is the secret sauce that people can use to create the vision and the change they want to see. Love that. But the one that I really love, if the problems are systematic, then
Mm-hmm.
too the solutions also are systematic. What
Mm-hmm.
tell me about community, Bill, and what's going on in the community, right? These nonprofits, these foundations, these purpose-driven organizations you're working with. What are some of the issues they're facing in the community? I mean, I'm pretty sure
Mm-hmm.
we know in general, but tell us what are you seeing out in Oakland?
Yeah. Yeah. Um. Great question, and sorry, I'm just getting over a cold too. But so I think when I first started doing this work, a lot of folks even wondered why I was going into nonprofit work. Like why not for a corporation or a bigger brand? And I think we all have seen over the last few years just the explosion of interest around racial justice and social justice because we see how important these issues are to our lives. I think for a long time they were seen as like niche issues, um, volunteer issues, charity issues, and now we've seen a lot of these, both the issues and the solutions go mainstream, which is super exciting, right? In a way that we haven't seen before. Mostly because we've all having to confront them. COVID was one of the things that was definitely, um, we say a lot, like it exacerbated a lot of the systemic issues that we are already seeing in our communities. We went through just the racial justice uprisings in 2020. Um, we're going through a lot of the anti-Asian sentiment and violence that's causing havoc in those communities. And so I think we are seeing both the issues and the solutions play out on a bigger stage than we ever have before. And hopefully that is all leading to real change and real transformation. That's what I'm hoping for. In terms of the issues that we focus on for our work, again, it's really related to racial justice as an issue. And so we tend to work on, for a long time, we worked on, and you're going to hear my daughter in the background this morning. For a long time, we worked on mass incarceration, and how that really harms Black and Brown communities, whether it's, policing or sentencing or youth justice. And so that's one of the things that we still work on. It's a long-term issue that we worked on. Another thing I'm super passionate about is just economic justice as well, and the racial wealth gap, and building real economic power for our communities so that we get listened to and we get heard. I think is super important to me. And then right now, voting rights and democracy is super important. This year is the midterms are happening this year. It's a really critical election year. And I think we're seeing just threats to our democracy in a way that we have not seen before. And so we're focused on that this year. And then I would say another thing that's just near and dear to my heart is issues around equitable childcare and maternal health justice, especially for Black mamas. Um, just both because of personal experience and systemic impact. Those are two things I'm super passionate about as well.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean, those some really cool topics, and I hadn't thought about it in that way that you describe it. Is that at first it was like it has a bittersweet message, right? You said it's an exciting time, and at first I'm like, I guess it is, right? Because if you take people who've, they've been in the struggle for a while, right? They've been, that brother, that's been like, brother Will on here. I remember when we were in undergrads, Will was like, hey, we need an MLK holiday, right? People have been in the struggle for a while, right? And this is a good opportunity that says, hey, finally people are paying attention. Maybe they'll
Mm-hmm.
listen. I was talking to someone recently, they were like, hey, it's not about awareness anymore because awareness is there. We
Yeah,
see it.
great
It
point.
is about
Yeah,
action, right? And
yeah,
getting to that
yeah,
point of, hey, awareness, no, 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 that was before 2016 or whatever.
yeah,
Now it's
right.
about action, right? So it is
Yeah.
exciting through that perspective. Now, I know you're passionate about the topic because you wrote a blog on it. Supporting mission driven organizations, change makers, and
Mm.
nonprofit. If you don't mind sharing with the audience, what are some ways you feel that individuals can make a difference? Because sometimes, you know,
Mm.
it's not in everybody to go start their own nonprofit. It's not in them to go,
Sure.
build this big, passionate dream team. What are some practical ways that you feel that individuals can really support these nonprofits, mission driven organizations?
Yeah. I actually don't know if I would encourage folks to start a nonprofit right off the bat. First, I would say take a look around in your community, see who's been doing the work for a long time, and figure out how to support those folks versus thinking you have just a new idea. I'm not against innovation, but I think take any issue, and there's probably a change maker in your community working on it right now. And so figuring out how to support those folks, I think, is super important. They definitely need your money, I think so. That's one of the easiest ways, and probably the first ways folks think about supporting the nonprofits in their community. They definitely also need your time, so thinking about, do they have volunteers? Are there ways you can chip in? And then thinking about how to support them for the long haul. I mean, I think we've seen kind of waves of support come and go for nonprofits or for issues based on what explodes on in terms of media or social media, and then needing to, even once that explosion of interest has dissipated, how do you really stick with these groups for the long haul, because they're in it for the long haul, are three of the ways that I think about supporting groups.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I guess you're right. There is this social media or media impact that I can imagine. It's like the Dalmatian.
Mhm.
Everybody go buys a Dalmatian because the movie comes out, but then they, once the hype leaves, then they take them to the shelter, and that's not cool, right? But these organizations are
Mm-hmm.
there for the long haul. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of being a seasonal supporter or a seasonal giver,
Mm-hmm.
being there thick
Mm-hmm.
and thin, being there to support them not only financially, but with your time
Yeah.
and your talent, as they say,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
time. Tamika, I think
Yeah.
we're ready. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead and say something. I'm sorry.
And one thing I was going to say is just thinking about where what your interest is. So we all, I'm sure, experience injustice in our lives all the time. And so thinking about what is it that really sometimes gets you upset, gets you worked up, and figuring out what group or what organization, what leader is figuring out how to address that issue in a systemic way, and then supporting them, I think, is a good way to start.
Yeah, that's real practical. I like that. If anybody looks around, you should be able to see something, right, that bothers you, that gets you going, that gets you thinking like that's just not right. And that's a good place to start because if you think about it, we tend to be more committed to the things we're passionate about, right? So,
100%.
if you don't care about, what's it, bicycles for tots, I mean, that's an important initiative, but if that's not your thing, you're not probably not going to stick with it for long term. So, Tamika, I got another question, but before that, I'm going to hold that question. Let's see what's on the audience mind. Who we got in the audience? Who we got questions from?
Right now, they're being shy and no one's put anything in chat.
Oh
So,
yeah, they're being shy. There's nobody.
yes,
They're being shy. So let's see who wants to come off mute. Who has a question? Let's see. Let me move this over here so I can show Bill in the other screen. Let's see here. I'm pretty sure. I love an awkward silence, by the way, even though we're recording. Because when you're recording, it
Well,
doesn't seem so long.
there's
That's
Will.
Will. I can
Thank you,
already
Will.
tell.
I've got a question, um, and it's a very personal to me type question. I am going to be starting my startup this summer. Right now, I'm in the phase of trademarking the name that will eventually be the name of my business. And I want to talk about positioning myself. I'm thinking as you were talking about TD Jakes' book, Repositioning Yourself. I want to know how you talk to organizations about positioning themselves for success in the lane in which they intend to drive, and how to
Mhm.
get more focused and clear about how to best manage the set of activities they need to manage in order to make the most out of the lane they happen to be positioning themselves in.
Mhm. Thank you for that question, and congrats. Sounds like you have some exciting days ahead with starting your startup. Um, I think it's always important just to start with the context, so I'm sure you've done this, but taking a look at the landscape you're in, who's out there doing similar things, or maybe things that are aligned with what you want to do. And then that helps you figure out what is the differentiator for you. What are the things that you're, including in your kind of your promise to whoever it is that you're serving, that makes you different. Um, and that could be either in your approach, the way you do things, or it could be in your services. It could be in terms of who you are as a leader, and the kind of business that you're going to build. But thinking about first the context, and then getting clear about your brand promise, your values, your brand personality, things like that are going to make you you know you, and stand out a bit different than other folks.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for that answer, Will, and thank you for that response, Bill. And who else we have with some questions? I've seen some new faces pop in, so I know there's some questions out there. and I love an
Also,
awkward
this
silence.
is also quite an audience. I can't really see you all, but
Yeah, I'm on
it's a
page
good
one.
group you have
Let's
out
see
there.
who's on page two here. Let's see here. I see
There's a
Keith out
question in the
there.
chat from Sherry.
Okay.
Do you do any work around the global sustainable goals? And Sherry, if you want to add to that, you can.
The global sustainable goals. I'm curious about what that entails.
Do you want to say more about that?
I meant the global goals. I meant global goals. Do you kind of, with your nonprofit, do you kind of do work according to the global goals, like poverty? You know.
Yeah, so we work with nonprofits. We ourselves are for-profit venture. So that's just one clarification. And there are sometimes clients whose work aligns with what the UN is doing through the global work. That's we don't have a global focus. A lot of the work that we do is based in the US, but sometimes there would be clients who talk about their work in relation to the UN global goals as well. But I would say that's not a huge focus for us.
Thank you.
I hope I answered your question too.
Yeah. Thank you,
Yes,
Sherry.
you did. You did.
That's another good question. Timmy, I see Timmy Young on there. Hey, brother.
Yes, sir. How you doing tonight?
How you doing, man? I'm looking forward to when we chop it up again. I got a show planned in a few, probably about a month from now. I'm gonna make sure I reach out to you and pull you in for that one. But thanks for dropping in tonight. Now I know you got a lot on your mind because I know you work at all kinds of initiatives. Any questions you guys for Bilen when it comes to building and communicating your message for your purpose-driven organization?
Yeah, I guess one of the questions I would have is what would you recommend for grassroots organizations, the neighborhood community type organizations to assist to uh, get moving forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you. We actually work with a lot of grassroots groups. That's near and dear to my to my heart. That we definitely believe in grassroots organizing and power building at the local level. And we actually keep our rates pretty flexible so we can work with grassroots groups in particular too. And I would just say, one of what I always say, which is that communications should be a priority, especially the smaller an organization is. The less capacity you have around communications, the more important it is to have strategic communication support because it helps you figure out how to best deploy the resources you do have for maximum impact. So we've done that for years, whether it's through like clinics for grassroots groups or working directly one on one with them or giving training or helping them implement some things. But great question. And for sure, I would say across the board, keeping communications as a priority is super important.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Timmy, because having talked to you and about your initiative, it definitely is a grassroots organization. And Bill, really makes me think about, what size organizations do you support? And I think you've answered it, right? You said, hey, large and small, we keep our rates in a flexible way that we can really help people. And it seems like you personally have a passion for these grassroots
100%.
organizations. So I love that, Timmy, and I think about it because sometimes for local grassroots organizations, in my mind, I can see people with a lot of passion for what they're doing. But then, how do you get that message out? Because that message begins to, gain supporters. I know talking to Letitia about some of the work she does with the native audience, and I can talk to people and I can hear the passion in their voice, but I can also can see how, it's hard to get that message out because you don't want your passion to be lost in the communication. And I'm just once again building until I started building things from scratch. I didn't realize how hard this thing was, but then I was like, yeah, I got a whole bunch of passion, but I have no idea how to communicate it in the way that people hear it, in a way because people are acting on it. Because I was reading something in your information and it talked about, At the end of the day, the purpose of the communication is to get to the donations, to the volunteer hours, and things like that. So there are some goals, right? So Tim, if your goals is like, I want to build this, I want to grow this, then I like how Bill and said we sit down and we talk about those things. Let's see more
Mhm.
questions. I see another first time
Yeah,
face,
and
Yolanda.
also
Go ahead, Bill.
just to answer that question, or that just to respond to that point, I actually think the way we think about communications is about sure, I think nonprofits need money, they need volunteer support to do their work, but like what's the broader goal beyond that? What does that help you do? So is it, a lot of change, I think a lot of change happens at the local and state level, so is it holding elected officials accountable at the local and state level? Is it figuring out what kind of systems change you want to win at the local and state level? Communications, the power of communications, I think, lies with helping with concrete change. So that's a huge part of our focus. I think we can't consider ourselves successful until we help with that versus just helping you get like more social media followers. That's great, but for what end is something that we think about a lot.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. And Kim just used the fancy raise her hand. I love it. See, she done this Zoom thing before. Kim, what's up, sister? She is back. How you doing? What question you got?
Hey, so I am truly enjoying the conversation. My question is that we have so many important issues that we talk about that we deal with, whether it's environmental, social justice, climate, racial equity. But we know the attention span of our audience is what, 15 seconds? They tell you 15, maybe 30 seconds. What what platforms and what initiatives would you recommend for us to share these very important topics to our audience in a manner where they will get it, but also it will be impactful?
Great question. I love that question. And I think it's a lot less than 15 seconds now, to be honest. It's like less than the attention span of a goldfish or something like that at this point. Um, I think, that's why it's super important to be very clear about, before you even get to platforms, to get very clear about your goal and who it is that you're trying to reach. You're not trying to reach everyone. So who are those folks that you really want to target and make sure hear you? And then getting clear about what kind of messages will they A, hear, and then B, act on. So I think those are super critical steps to get before you even get to a place of like the platform, and I think once you determine, what the goal is and who, that will even help you figure out what the platform is. So for example, I'll give you an example about I was helping one group with a communication strategy, and they're like trying to go mass communication, and really they're trying to just reach a handful of judges, and so for those folks, you might just even pick up the phone and call them. You might not need to be on Twitter or Facebook, and so that helps you save a lot of time, it helps you save a lot of money, and it also helps you be more effective. So I think coming from a much more strategic place versus trying to do all the things all at once. We're in a place where, to your point, there's a lot of content, there are a lot of platforms, and you have to make some strategic choices about what you're going to choose versus just like adding to the noise. And the best way to do that is by thinking about the goal, the audience, and then figuring out the messaging that's going to move that audience. And the way to deploy the messaging to get to that audience is really important.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Anything you want to add to that, Kim?
No, I'm good. I think it's still identifying the audience. Obviously, we've done, but there's so many things that we want to get out there. So I'm struggling with trying to, compress that and put it in a place where, we can get different types of messaging out for the different audience.
Yeah, even as I think about that, I mean, it's really it's tricky, And when it comes to platforms, it's like I like what Billen said. It's definitely the strategic, the strategy, and who you're targeting. And then I also think about where do people live, right? Certain
Mhm.
people live in different platforms, right? Do certain people live in the newspaper? Yes, they do. They still live there. Well, who lives over here, right? For us, I'm thinking about some of our main numbers is what, 35 to 55, right?
Yeah.
And they tend to live, they're comfortable here. I've thought about changing platforms, and I think, well, that's where people live, right? I won't, me, I want the fancy technology, but other people don't want the fancy technology. So I just stay here because that's where people live. But I think it is tough. And I think, you know, even thinking about that topic, what happens if you discover they live in different places? Then that's just even more fun. But I'm just kind of throwing it into the discussion part. So I see Yolanda here. She's a new voice, a new face. Hey, Yolanda, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Great, great. I hadn't seen you since UNC days. UNC won
Mm.
today. I'm rocking my UNC beat Duke shirt. So
All right.
that's
All
that's how
right.
we roll. So how
Yes,
you
sir.
doing, Yolanda? What's on your mind? You got any questions for us?
No, I mean, I appreciate hearing all the content coming from you guys. You're doing a great job. I guess I don't know if this was asked already, but what made the shift to say I'm no longer can do this by myself? I need 12 additional consultants. What was the pivot for that?
Yeah, great question.
I like that
It
question.
started out with just one person. I wasn't even thinking about 12 people. I really just wanted to hire one more person. And to be honest, it's because I wanted to start a family, and I realized that I was nonstop working, round the clock, and I couldn't see a path to having a family and just working as a solo consultant. And that's really the shift that got me started to thinking about adding one person initially and then growing from there. And the mindset it took just to even think about not just supporting my own salary with somebody else's salary, that took some work. And once I got that under my belt, then I started thinking about bringing on two folks, and it just kind of grew from there. And this time around, bringing on five people at once is probably the largest batch of hiring that we've done. And there were many steps between that and this. But appreciate the question. That's a really good
Yeah,
one.
that's a real question. It's also known as a 4-year-old, and 4-year-olds pop up, be like, "Hey, we got to grow." So I got one more question for you, Bill, and we're
There's one
done.
more in
But
the chat
oh, we got
too.
another one in the chat. Okay,
Yeah.
go to the chat first.
How do you create a marketing strategy for sensitive topics such as domestic violence awareness?
Ooh,
Mm, yeah, super super important. We have not done a lot around domestic violence. We definitely do work around crime survivors, especially Black and Brown crime survivors. A lot of folks who are being directly impacted by injustice, whether it's formerly incarcerated folks or um, we just finished this work around uh, young people who are being exploited. So one thing we really believe in when we're working on those kinds of issues is um, making sure that the people who are being directly impacted are also empowered as part of the work. And so we follow this model. We call it ethical storytelling model. It's actually that is a model that exists that we follow. I don't want to pretend that we created that particular model, but it's ensuring that the folks who are being directly impacted have a say in the way those stories are told as part of the communication strategy. So it's not just folks who haven't experienced that kind of dictating what the solutions or the strategy is going to be, but that we're really putting folks who are being directly impacted at the center of the work. It's just one differentiator that I can think of around doing comms for sensitive issues.
thank you, thank you. I love that approach, and I love how it includes, like you said, the people impacted. So, Bill, and thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for sharing with us this opportunity, and it's so cool to touch base with you after all of these years and to see the great work that you're doing. To see that during this Women's History Month, to be able to reach out to somebody who's, doing their thing. And it's, I just like believe we got to celebrate our people, right? And I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of the things you're doing, and kudos to you and your husband, and the fam, because being able to create an environment, right, that dream team that represents the values, that no BS culture, or what you call it locally, to be able to give yourself that work-life balance, and at the same time to be sincere about it, that hey, it can be a little scary, right? Like I know sometimes people would ask me questions. I'm like, yeah, it didn't work that way, and then I begin to kind of share the blood, sweat, and tears, and I'd be like, oh, okay. So I love that answer. Is like, when did you decide to grow? Oh, when I had a baby, because that's real, right? Because and it's real. So I appreciate that, and I value that. One last question for you. But before I ask that question, I want to tell people about next week. Next week, if it's your first time here, we're recognizing various leaders in the community for this Women's History Month, and we have two special ladies next week. Both professors, both who are teaching, and they're covering a topic that some would consider sensitive, but it's an academic word. It is the silent, and I quote, the silent, strong black woman. On this topic of the silent, strong black woman, we're going to dig into the topic. We're going to see, what does research say? We're going to see why one of these professors is actually building a PhD program that has support and understanding. And this show was actually inspired by someone that I know closely, and I've known her over 20 years and didn't realize how strong this person was, how much stuff that they were dealing with. So the story is really inspired by witnessing something like, wow, you really have to be that strong? I've known you for 20 plus years and you're being that strong? That seems too strong. So I get it, I'm a guy, but my goal is to find the stories, to find the people, and bring it to you. So looking forward to that. Come on back next week. Bilen, one last question for you. With everything we said, how do you stay motivated? I mean, this work can be hard. I've learned many years ago with some of my friends with the NAACP is that, this work can be toxic. This is before they were doing mental health, checks and breaks. I didn't realize how heavy this work can be. How do you kind of, stay motivated, with all of this stuff, with all of these messages that often may not be happy? I mean, any recommendations, any things that you do personally to kind of keep yourself, in a good place?
Mm. Well, first, let me just say thank you for having me on the show. It's been super fun. Thank you for sharing your platform with me. I appreciate reconnecting and just having this conversation. So thank you so much. In terms of what keeps me motivated, to be honest, I think the groups that we work with and the changemakers keep me motivated. It's some amazing folks who are really thinking about solutions to a lot of the challenges that we face, folks who are really dedicated. We're spending a lot of time and energy to imagine a new world, to kind of imagine a world without these injustices that we take we take as reality every day. Like, there are folks out there who are really thinking about, like, what does the work look like or the world look like if these things didn't exist? And I find that to be super inspiring and super motivating. And it gets me through, I think, to your point, like some of the re-traumatizing that we all deal with on a daily basis. And so if we can help them win, then, we win too. So that's what keeps me going.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you very much for being here tonight. I look forward to working with you guys again.
Thank you for joining us at Southern Soul Livestream Talk Show. Join us weekly at soullivestream.com. If you're joining us live, we'll take a quick music break and then come back for a discussion with the audience.